Hi, and welcome back to Life Prepared. Today I'm going to show you a super easy project that you can make using scrap fabrics, and it's very fat quarter friendly. It's a little trash bag for your car. Has a little handle that can go over the shifter knob. You can make them in any size. This one's a little bit smaller, and this one's a little bit larger for somebody who, well, let's say needs a bigger trash container. I'm going to show you how I made this one today. The supplies are really simple. You're going to need a piece of fabric for the outside. In this case, it just happens to measure 12 by 20 inches. You can use the same fabric or you can use a different fabric for the inside. I chose to use this black, which happens to measure the 20 inches, but I made this one 11 3/4 because that helps it tuck down on the inside a little bit when we get to that final step. You're also going to need a piece for the handle. I'll show you how to make it. I just happen to get a little ahead of myself here. This piece originally measured 3 inches by the 12 inches. I just cut a little piece off the one end. And as an option, you can add interfacing to the back side, as I have already done here, of your outer fabric. That just adds a little bit more stability. It's really not necessary, so if you don't have any, don't run to the store to buy any. If you're using a thicker fabric, maybe like an old pair of blue jeans, you won't need anything like this at all. And honestly, it's just me. Completely optional. Your first step is really easy. If you want to put the interfacing on, just iron it on to the back of your outer fabric. Once that's done, you take both pieces, both the lining and the outside fabric, fold them in half, matching the short sides together. Sew a seam about 1/4 inch on the side. You can use a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, whatever you're most comfortable with, but they have to be the same on both pieces. Now that I have them sewn, each of them, I'm going to take the fabric, I'm going to iron it in half and put a little bit of a crease there. Because I want to take where I made the seam, I'm going to center it over where my crease is here. Doesn't have to be 100%, but I'm getting it as accurate as possible. Open it up. I'm going to press again on the two sides because I'm going to use that later when I put the bag together to help match things up a little bit. I'm going to open this seam up and press. I need to do both fabrics. I did my outside, and here's my liner. Open it up, match the seam relatively well, and press. Once again, opening that seam up. Now that both of these are pressed, I'm going to take them back to the sewing machine. On the lining fabric, I'm going to sew in approximately 2 inches putting back stitches really well. I'm going to skip the center portion and I'm going to sew about another 2 inches on this side, back stitching really well on both sides. I'm going to need that little opening in here when we turn this right sides out. On the outside piece, I'm just going to stitch all the way across. I have both of these sewn. My next step is just going to be to clip the corners. I don't want to go into the stitching, I just want to go up close to it. And set that aside. On the outer fabric, I'm going to turn it right sides out, being very careful to poke those corners out really well. I'm going to set that aside for a moment. Now remember I told you I would show you how to do this. Very easy. I'm going to use a different fabric, but you'll understand what I'm doing here. Take your fabric. All you have to do is iron it in half. Once it's ironed in half, open it back up, turn the side into the middle, press, turn the other side into the middle, and once again press. When you're done with that, you just turn both edges in like so. And then you top stitch on both sides, just like I did with this one. Top stitched here and I top stitched here, and that would make your finished handle. Once you have your handle made, you're going to take your outer fabric, which is right sides out, you're going to put it inside your lining fabric, which is wrong sides out. You still have the seam here. I'm going to make it so that my seams are matched up when they're inside. You're going to match your centers. And for just a second, I'm going to put a pin in here because I need to add my handle. But this lets me get my fabric together before I finish it up. I like to put them inside, smooth it out pretty well. Where you have, now I don't know if you can see it, but there's a seam where I pressed it. And there's the coordinating seam where I pressed it. I'm going to just put those together. And I'm going to place a pin. On the sides, I'm going to find the area I pressed. Once again, my lining fabric is pressed here. My inner fabric is pressed here. Now, in case anybody asks, you do not have to finish over the edge here. This is something that I bought. It was a pillowcase that was never used. I picked it up for $1, and I used it to make this project. Match up my other side. Once again, pinning that together. I'm just going to make sure everything lays nice and flat. All right. Now, if you want, which I usually do, I add pins in between. But that's totally optional. Depends on your sewing skill. Now, before I go to the machine, I need to add my handle. So, on the back, where you match that seam together, I'm going to take that pin out. I need to tuck however I want your handle. Do you want it like this? Do you want it like this? Tuck it between the two layers. I'm going to take and place it on either side of the seam. It helps cut down a lot of bulk at the machine, and my poor machine doesn't have to struggle across all those seams. I'm going to pin this side, take my other side, and I like to pin that in place. That way I know it's caught in there really well. I'm going to take this to the machine. I'm going to sew all the way around the entire bag. Now that I've sewn around the entire bag, now comes the fun part. And if you did it the way I said, it will come out right. And if it didn't, go back and watch the video. First time I made one, I got it backwards. I had to take it apart and redo it. That's what happens sometimes in sewing. Your seam ripper becomes your best friend. All right, I'm going to pull it right sides out. Making sure I get the corners out on my liner. Now, to close this up, you can either stitch by hand, but since nobody's even going to notice, I'm going to iron this down. I'm going to take it to the machine, and I'm going to sew all the way across the bottom to close up that opening there. Once your bottom is stitched all the way across, comes the fun part. You get to poke the lining inside, matching up your corners inside with your fingers. And then I'm going to take it back to the machine once I get it all nice and smooth, and I'm going to top stitch all the way around the bag. There you have it. I top stitched all the way around, and my bag is complete. This is going to make a wonderful gift for somebody. If you like this project, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and consider hitting that notification bell so the next time I have a really quick and easy project, you'll be the first to know.